Awesome. Recording is started. People can see the screen. They can hear me. I sound decent. Not great, but decent. Cool. No, it's all good. Thank you guys for being here today. I am really excited to dive into all the new stuff in the LightShark beta, particularly, hey, Jamie Brock, particularly the effects. There are a couple other things in there besides the effects that I'm going to go first because that's, the minority of things. Um, and so the biggest things, guys, is you're going to see a couple things if you do go and upgrade to this software. For as they've mentioned before, and as it's always been clearly stated, this is in beta right now. It's quite stable. It's not 100% perfect, as any beta software is, but it's getting there. So with that said, the overarching recommendation is if you're going to go install this on a console, don't use it during a show. Thankfully, the Light Sharks are really good about rolling back updates if you ever need to do that. Even if it gets to the point, I know we had one guy with one of the betas who had trouble rolling back, just installing a previous update on top of the newer update. And he just backed up his file, factory reset, installed the last stable version, and everything was great for him. And so you can go back. That's a question that comes up a lot, and it's good to know. But when you do update, there's going to be a couple things you get. One is you're going to notice the new LightShark logo in some different places. Right here on this side of the screen, up here, and also on the little screen on the LS1. Um, Other than that, there also is a new couple things in the settings. So in the settings here, we have in the user preferences a double clear mode now. And I would recommend, I don't know, putting that as your regular. I do appreciate that a lot. So that basically the first clear deselects and two clears out like the old single clear was, a full clear. Okay, how does this apply to your life? Well, you're programming along, you're selecting different things. It sure is nice to be able to just hit clear once to deselect instead of having to go in and deselect all of your groups or fixtures or what have you in order to just deselect something. So when you do press that clear once in the double clear mode, sorry, um, the everything you're working with is still hanging out in your programmer. Okay, you're still programming. Those values are still in there. When you press record, they'll still be recorded in the queue. They're just not selected anymore. Okay, and so that's going to be a big time saver for a lot of people. Okay, so that is pretty much all there is besides the effects. I'm just double checking the changelog here to make sure I don't miss anything else. So the effects are a really big deal. Okay. If you update to this version, just know whether you're updating in the beta or when it's a release, any effects that you have in older show files are going to stop working. Okay. Yes, I know that can be frustrating, but it's just one of those things that the upside is good enough that taking the time to update your cues and re-add your effects back in is going to be worth it. And ultimately, as we go into the future, when it's a year or two after this has been released, there's going to be very few people running into that problem because you're going to create new show files on the beta. It's not going to wipe out any old effects because you're in the new effects the whole time, and everything will be great. And there will just be, unicorns with ice cream. And so, let's dive into the effects. So, there's a few concepts with the effects that I want to show you. I've just got one in the programmer right now. So the first thing that starts to build the effects is the new two-dimensional layout that's available. Okay. For any group that you've created, so the auto groups where they say auto underneath them, those ones made in the patch of the console, not those ones, but any group you make, and it can be as simple as just taking an auto group, selecting it, hitting record, making your own version. Okay. There are some new options. One, you'll see here in the naming when we held down on that group or we press edit and press that group, or not edit and press the group, just when we hold down on it. Sorry, getting ahead of myself. We have the ability to color code. Can be helpful. You can color code by type, whatever you want. You get a nice little color code there. Helps you stay organized. But it goes deeper than that. So if we press edit and then press our group, we now get this window, which is completely new. Okay. Maybe you saw this in some of the demos, etc. This is a 2D representation of your group. If I go to this one that I just created, when you first start, it's going to zoom to approximately the size of the group. So this one is like 8 lights, I think. So it zooms in pretty tight. But if you have more lights, it's going to be zoomed out further. It's a pretty huge grid. I haven't counted the exact size of it, but it's for the amount of lights you can put in a LightShark, it's pretty big. And as you can see, you can zoom in and zoom out by pinching, by using your scroll wheel. You can also switch the navigation up here from panning to selecting. And then there's a quick button to just zoom to selection in the upper right-hand corner here. Now, this is really powerful because it allows you to lay things out. Before I leave this view, you can see if you do zoom in, you see patch and name information on those fixtures that you have within the view. But when we go ahead to one that I've worked with and customize, this can get really powerful. So I've taken this and I've just laid out more or less what I have in the visualizer here. Okay. It's not exactly because these 3 rows of fixtures are kind of on top of each other. And then this is the front light, but it gets you there. Moving fixtures around is just as simple as highlighting them. Whoops. And then clicking, highlight and click. And you can move things around. It's really simple. So maybe I go ahead and I start to move these guys around. Whoops. Maybe I put 10 out here. 9 goes here. 8 goes here. Not bad. Okay. And so you can lay things out in 2D. Now, what's the purpose of this? The purpose of this is purely for running effects right now. Okay. It looks nice, it's cool, etc. But when we exit out of this and we save, that's important. Running effects on this is where things get really powerful. So in the new effects, here on the side, you've got your parameters. You've got intensity, position, beam, advanced, gobo, color, and then effects. You're used to this from the old effects engine if you've used it before. And then across the effects, we've got intensity, position, beam, color, and advanced. But now, unlike previously, when we start an effect, all the lights start the effect at once, right? And so that's something that I know was highly requested, and I'm really glad to see that you're able, when you start that effect, when it starts in a queue, when it starts in the programmer, no matter where it starts, all the lights start at the same time, and you don't get a funky lag for where everybody's kind of getting started, right? Etc. And so that's how that would go. And these arrows here are where the 2-dimensional layout really helps us. So most consoles, for their effects, including the LightShark previous to this, are going to run the effect in the selection order of the lights, meaning when you stored that group or when you selected that lights before you went with it, the order that you selected the lights in is the order the effect runs in. That's the normal way of life. And that's generally how this works here too, but with a little, extra. So this first arrow, the, left to right, is that order, right? It's the order that the lights are selected in. That's how it's going to go. That's based on how the lights are ordered within the 2D. Okay. And so that is, if it's, the default, it's just going to be 1 through 10 or however many lights you have, but you can move it around. You can change it. But what's cool is now you can reverse it and you can get even more powerful. So there's a lot in here that you can scroll through, or you can press the all button. And now we can bring this into the 2D space. Now, you can set up your 2D space more as an overhead type view, more as a front type view, or however in the world you want to that makes sense. So now we can do things really easily, like a center out effect or an out to center effect. And then the really cool ones are where you start to get into the second dimension, where you start to go back to forward, which is not a good example with this effect. Or you go center out. This is where it gets kind of nuts. Like, for example, let me just go ahead and turn everything on. Hit my clear once and not everything disappears. It is glorious. And then we'll go to color and we'll just run the RGB effect, let's say. And we will take our lights super quick too, and we'll turn off the white in fixtures that have white. Oh, it's because the spots also don't have color in them. We'll turn off the white to make that a little more saturated. Same on these units, a little more visible to you. So now we're back here. We're running our effect. And if we go ahead and do like forward to back, now it runs that colored effect in the forward to back that I've defined here. And so it's like, for me, that's like back truss top, back truss middle, and then this is the pars in the back is the next row. And then after that, we have the front light whoops over there. I can always hit this arrow to get back, and it runs it in that order. And if I go, even crazier, I can go diagonal. I can do a bounce. So this is where it runs one way and then it bounces back out to center. There's a lot of stuff in here, which is really powerful. And the fact that you can just quickly change it on the fly is really cool. Okay. So you're going to see on the basic level, this is where we've got our different color effects. I can do one on the color wheel too for those other movers. These are the most basic effects. They have a size control. So that's how much does the effect affect the lights, right? How much does it offset from the regular value? You can go 0 to 100. I'll show you that with the pan and tilt effect in a minute. You've got speed. How fast does the thing run? That's pretty obvious. You've got phase. Now, phase is a control for like offset, as it's sometimes called. Okay. So how far apart does it run? Are the lights really spread out? Oops, I just clicked on something. Are the lights really spread out, or are they not spread out much at all? And then width is the overall kind of sizing of the effect and how clustered or unclustered the lights are. I admit the width one is probably the hardest one to kind of grasp, but it's a little easier to see on pan tilt. So let's go there. So say I grab my lights here. I'll just go ahead and grab the Borealis and the TX5s here. And I'm going to go ahead and do a tilt. Okay. So we've got a nice tilt effect here. They're nicely offset. Slow it down a little. And so as you can see, if we adjust size, it adjusts how far off of their base they're going to tilt, how far off of their base they're going to roll. Okay. Is going to be the size control. Next, speed, of course, is how fast do they do it. With a lot of parameters in lights, as you may be aware, if you start to go too fast, it's going to restrict the amount of range that it's able to move within that time, right? If I crank the speed up, they really don't move far at all, even though the effect size is much bigger. Okay. Next, we have the phase. So that is, okay, how far are different fixtures apart? You noticed it was right in the middle at 180 initially, which means half of our fixtures, and the other half were exactly halfway across each other. While one fixture was at one side of the effect, the other fixture was at the other. Okay. And that grew. Okay. So you can grow that up all the way to 360, which then is the same as 0, where they're all back together again. Okay, so it's a 0 to 180 being exactly halfway across from each other. Anywhere in between gives you a nice cool offset, which you're able to work with. Again, we can adjust any of these and then change the curve as to the direction as to how it's going, which is super cool. And then we've got our width. Awesome. So one question that did come in on this so far is about tap tempo. So as of now, there is not a tap tempo. I don't believe for the effects. Okay, maybe if it's hiding, maybe here. I haven't personally found it. There's a couple things that I know they've promised are going to come here that aren't quite in the software yet. So let's just for kicks play this on Fader 8. and then see if we do have a tap tempo. Lean over to my LS1 super quick. Yeah, so as of right now, I don't believe there's a tap tempo, at least on these regular effects. But that is something that's definitely on the pipeline for when the update totally does, for when it really does come out. And so that is there. The other thing that there will be, besides even better than tap tempo, I think at least, is a speed fader. So as much as I like tap tempo, I like speed faders even more. And speed faders is just they're going to call them submasters. There's going to be a new window. It's not there yet. And there's going to be 3 or 4 faders in there. So there's going to be one for effects speed. So this is an overall for any effect that's running, a control of the speed to override it. There's going to be an effects size one. And then there's going to be and then there's going to be an effects speed for the selected effect, I believe is how it's going to work. Again, that's something that they have in development. We don't have in public yet, but it will get there once it is ready. So with effects, there's a few different things we can do to store them, okay? So as you saw a minute ago, you can go ahead and just, build an effect right here and record it straight to a queue, and that will work all day long. There also, in advanced, are effects palettes, okay? And so this works like any other palette. Here, I've made a second one now, where you just, build an effect over here or in the advanced effects editor, which is what we're about to open up and get into. You build that effect, you store it as an effect palette here, and then it works like any other palette where you can press on that palette and you're going to get the effect that you stored, which is pretty cool. I think that one's a pan tilt effect. Other things before we get to the advanced is there is the ability to do no effects, which turns off the effects. It knocks it out of the programmer effectively, and also block effects. So an effects block is different than no effects at all. And what that allows you to do, just to show you an example, is if I go here to position and I do a block effects, everything stops. If I record that to a queue, now everything's rolling. I bring that queue up, it stops. So this can be a way that you can have maybe a fader that has an effect on it that has different parameters. It could have an effect for color and pan tilt and intensity on it. Okay, it's got all those things. And then you could have a fader or an executor button even that was just stop effects on pan tilt, stop on color, stop intensity. And to make that happen, all you would do is select the lights, select that block effects. That blocks out the effects, effectively sets the size of the effect to 0. And then it's there as long as you have that active. Then you release that queue, you stop it, you turn off the executor, and you're back to the races. Everything's rolling once again. Okay. And so that's a cool new functionality as well. Wasn't there before. You'll see in the pan tilt effects, there are a number of shapes as well. So different shapes you can use. Before there were, 2 or 3, and now there are many more. And then the real power comes in when we go ahead and start to use, I'm just going to turn the intensities on through some faders, start to use the effects editor. Okay. The effects editor under advanced here is where the really powerful stuff happens. So the effects editor is based off of your palettes that you have for your lights. Okay. So I've gone ahead for my lights in this show, and I've built palettes for intensity, for position, for gobos. There are the pre-built ones for lights that have them, for colors as well too. Okay. And I've got all those built and ready to go ahead of jumping into the effects editor. Then we'll go here to advanced, to effects editor. And this is where things get really interesting. They get more complicated, sure. It takes a little bit longer to set these up, yes. But this is what allows you to do some great things. Say, for example, you want to set up an effect. This is a simple one. that goes. Actually, let me select just one group of lights so that I have more options here. So we're just going to grab these 8 lights, pop into our effects editor. These are the pars on the backdrop here. Add a layer. And now we're going to go to color, and we're going to do an effect that jumps from UV to, I don't know, green. Yeah. Okay. Something that wouldn't be super easy to do, or maybe not green. Maybe we go ahead and we delete this step here at the bottom. And we go ahead and add a amber, because amber is not just like a straight red, green, or blue. Okay. Um, you can see here that in the default settings, it's just going to bounce between those 2 colors. Okay. Maybe I go ahead and I add a magenta, and we'll go to pink so it's a little more visible. We add a pink step in. Okay. Now we can start to have fun. We could stretch it out so it's just a third, a third, a third. Is it, maybe you set it up so 50% is UV and the other 50% is amber pink. You can do whatever you want. Then within each step, there's even more. Okay. So there's different curve types. You can have them snap like this, do a softer curve, a little sine wave, a bouncy curve, stair steps, whatever you want to do. All of these, as you see, have different parameters. So this bottom section for this portion allows you to set a start point for each step, a start limit, how high that particular parameter can be, an end limit, and then depending on the curve type selected, you're going to have different curve parameters here. So this sine wave, for example, has a flat plateau before you go in. When you crank up the in, when you crank down the out, you get a flat plateau as well, where it's just sticking in the color. Or, this applies to pan tilt, this applies to intensity. And then you have the strength, which is, the curviness of the curve per se, how that one works. But they all have different options, right? The stair steps one has jumps. How many steps do you have? This one has jumps as well, kind of a linear or an exponential regression, almost not really exponential, but I don't know what it is. I didn't do well in math, but you get the idea. All of these have different options that you're able to adjust and do some really cool stuff with. Not only that, but you can add more layers. So if I go to add layer here, top or bottom, doesn't matter. Now we'll add some intensity presets, right? So do full, do 0. I may have to bring the fader down. We can do that. Just bring my faders down. Yeah, now we got it. And now go back in. Now we have a full to 0. Maybe we should put this over here. And now we've got a nice chase across our lights. Just like that. And so the biggest thing about these new effects is you just want to experiment with them overall. There's a lot in here, a lot that they can do. I'll go over some more examples here, including some pan tilt stuff. And then anything you do, you can begin to store here as effects palettes. Of course, you can hold the name on them, works the same as everything else in the LightShark. And then you're good to go. Let's do an example with pan tilt. So this time I'm going to grab these Borealis lights, go to the effect editor, start with an intensity layer, add in a color layer. Oops, sorry, add a layer plus. You note on the same level, of course, it can only do one type of parameter. You can't go between multiple parameters on different layers. That wouldn't work so well. Then we'll go ahead and add a pan tilt layer. So maybe we'll start at the down position. Then we'll go to the fan out position. Then we'll go to the downstage center position. And now we're starting to see some really cool stuff here. Any of these different layers you can go ahead and turn blind. Okay. And so you can work with the effects by turning off any of the layers, see how it looks, see if you like it, see if you don't. End up deleting the stuff off of it if you don't like it. That is totally fine. And a second one up here. So as you can see, it's really quick and easy to make some really cool stuff. Not only that, but this stuff, as you can see, if things line up in this editor, and that's what the sync button ultimately is going to do as well, is this will resync the effect as it's running, but there's going to be some grid lines that it'll jump to eventually before the release comes out. I believe they're saying you're going to have the ability then to just line this stuff up, and when things line up, then they'll go ahead and they'll be in sync with each other. Okay. So maybe we do another full and another 0 here. Get them all lined up real nice. And as you can see, they start to look really interesting. All right. Awesome. I see a couple questions. I'd love to take any other questions that are coming in. So I'm going to grab a quick sip of water and then answer these questions. You can either use the chat or the question and answer, but if there are a lot of questions coming in, we'll have to use the question and answer solely. All right, so Colin Grant wrote, is the LightShark screen and related lighting preview web-based? No, it is not, Colin. So the LightShark, being that it runs a custom Linux operating system, it does not run on the web or on Windows or on Mac. So I've got a console here in my office. And then the visualizer is just the capture visualizer. We've got a couple videos on the WorkPro TV channel that talk about visualizers. I believe there's a couple demo files as well still on the WorkPro website that you can get as well, just to be able to use a demo file with the LightShark. There are multiple visualizers out there. We have other videos and content that talk about that. But at the end of the day, a visualizer is not going to run on the LightShark console itself. But you can run it on a PC, on a Mac, whatever. Any other questions about the effects so far? Just looking over the notes here. For the next beta version, they are going to have it so you can edit and update your effects palettes so far. Also, there will be those new submaster windows and again, the guides for aligning effects steps. I'm going to clear here because Mikael has a question. I hope I said your name right. Check and make sure there's nothing else that I missed. I think we're good there. So circle effect symmetrical. Yeah, we should be able to do that. I'll grab these lights here. We'll find them. Actually, let's just grab the backlight ones. So we got 6 of those. We're going to go ahead and do a position one. So as mentioned before, Mikael, the effects editor, and when you bring things into this spreadsheet here, this is going to be using only your palettes. So for this, I'm going to use the pre-built. So here we've got a nice circle. And then we can go in, out, we can go out, in. Probably what I would do in this instance is I would go ahead and build it in 2 parts. I would build my first part as one group. Then we'll build our second group here. So first half and second half. So this is the first half. This is the second half, and we'll just give them a color so that is obvious. And then I would go and go to effects. See if it'll let me grab them both, put it in a circle. This is new to all of us. Take the second half and we'll reverse it. That is not making it symmetrical, so we'll keep trying. That is the fun part. I believe that's what you're asking, right? Is, like the left half of the stage would go one way and the right half would go the other. And I believe it should be able to do it. Question is how. Awesome. Any other questions while I work on this effect for Mikkel? So in that instance, it may or may not be doable to make a symmetrical double-sided circle, but I'm going to keep trying because it may be possible, it may not. Let's know if there's any other questions so far, because that's pretty much covered all these here. They all generally work the same way. That's the nice thing about it, is once you learn how to do it with one parameter, it's really kind of the same to work with any other parameter, which is really helpful. That you can just super easily get started. But I think you're right, Mikkel. We don't really have a shape to run an effect backwards at this time, which would enable you to make a symmetrical effect like that. I mean, certainly we could go ahead and just do all of our lights and do an in to out, and you get a nice effect there. Is it perfectly symmetrical? No. Is it close? Yeah. Might I may be able to get it there? I might. We'll see. But that's definitely something to look into, something to try. But at the end of the day, I'm really excited about this, and I hope you guys are too, as it continues to develop and get refined. Because these effects allow you to do a lot of things that you weren't able to do before in the LightShark, and really makes it easy to do some really interesting stuff. My best recommendation to anybody is, if this does look interesting to you and you have a little bit of time between shows, which right now you probably do, though things are starting to come back, which is great. Sit down, give it a try, see what happens, etc. You know, and that'll make it work well. As for any other questions, we're totally open to any other questions through about what we're covering today. Any questions about etc. Okay, Leno's asking, how can we store the effects preset and then use it on presets that we already made? Can we have a fixed scene and only change various effects? Yeah, that should be no problem, Leno. So if I'm following you correctly, you're just talking about having, a scene of lights. Like I think I've got one on this fader. And I've got some intensity here. Let's see here where I've got a scene. Whoop. So you've got something playing basically, and then you want to add effects on top of it. So say this scene is playing, and then you want to go ahead and build some effects on top of it. Yeah, that's totally doable. You would just, it really depends on what type of show you have, but maybe you go ahead and actually turn all this stuff off. Maybe you go ahead and you start with the scene and you just turn everything on and you just make it magenta. Why not? And you put that on a cue, you play it, and you're good to go. Then you start to build effects. So you could call up those effects from other faders. That's no problem. Let's see, where did I have an effect? I think on here. Here I call up an effect and then I go back to my scene. And you could also build effects into an existing cue stack, just as before. So I could grab my lights here and I could go ahead and do a color thing. Maybe I just add in green on all the lights like that. Slow that way down. And then I record that as a second scene. Then I go ahead and maybe I do no effects for my next scene, and maybe I just grab these lights and I do a position effect. All right, I get that looking how I desire. I record that as my next cue. Now if I play these back, here I was on Q1. Then I'm going to go to Q2 where I turned them off accidentally. So I will update that in a minute. But we stack our effects right on top of there. Q3 comes in the pan and tilt effect. And so, yeah, you can totally stack stuff just like any other cue onto a fader, stacking only what you've recorded since the last cue. That is totally doable as well. Is it possible to call palettes with time? No, it is not in the LightShark. Again, that's one of those things where sometimes in the LightShark there's stuff that we're not able to do just for the sake of the simplicity of a console, keeping in mind that, this isn't a professional grade console. Sure, it could do professional shows. Sure, it's stable as can be. It's incredibly stable. But it's not the same as a Grand May or a Hog or something else like that, right? And it's, that's not its purpose. And so, a feature like that, I'm not sure is ever going to come just because it's not really what the LightShark's designed it to. It's designed to record stuff to cues and then have those play back. Punting a live preset with time, I'm not sure is in the scope with what they're going to add, but you never know. Soon as well, there will be a new LS Cloud. I don't know if you guys are familiar with it, but on the WorkPro website, there is a section called the LS Cloud that they're redoing right now. If you log into it right now, it looks like this, but I know they're redoing this and it will be ready hopefully soon. I think they're going to release it like when the software actually releases as the stable release. And you're going to be able to go in there and the user voice section right now, it'll probably still be called that, is where you can make suggestions for improvements. And they're always taking suggestions as long as they are doable. Like here we see the top suggestion is the new effects engine because, well, we've needed it. Now we've got it here, which is great. Is there a possibility of a bigger, more powerful desk? Of course, there's always that possibility. And ask the folks at WorkPro in Spain. Keep asking them, and you never know what you might find. And that's all I can say about that. I cannot say, is it going to come out? Is there the possibility of a desk coming out this year? I don't think so, but who knows? Not me. But the development team is definitely always entertaining those possibilities to have something with a little more gusto under it. Yeah. Awesome, guys. Well, as mentioned previously, this is this is what we're covering here. Glad to cover more if you guys want to go over more stuff. Certainly, there's a lot of cool stuff to play around with here if you haven't downloaded already. But that's about all I've got prepared for this webinar. As you can see, there's a lot of fun stuff you can do, especially as you can see here, there's no problem combining a advanced custom effect with the regular effects in here. What does the star pattern do? It makes kind of a funky looking weird star thing. I'm not sure if I'm totally sold on the star pattern, but your show is your show and use what you want to use, right? Um, I think I like the squiggle before I like the star, but even the squiggle to me, like any of these, like the squiggle and the star and the Z, like that have a defined start and end that they then have to wrap around to, feels funky to me as opposed to these other shapes that are closed. That's just my personal point of view. But you can like what you want to like. Um, the good thing is that there's more options now, right? Whereas there used to be like three options. Now there's real options, and we like that. We're happy about that. Is there an offline editor? So there is not an offline editor for the LightShark. You do have to have at least an LS core to be able to practice at home with you. Yeah. Um, at this point, whether there will be in the future or not, I don't know. I know it's something they've definitely looked into and are considering, but I don't think we have a definite timeline on anything like that right now. Great question. Remember, folks, as well, just if you do upgrade your console, if you weren't here at the start, any effects that you have that were created with the old effects do stop working when you install an update that has the new effects. Um, and that is just how it is. Over the long term, of course, that will be less of a problem than it is initially, but it's not a big deal now. One question right now, is the LS1 or LS Core more powerful? Nope, they are the same computer. They are exactly the same. One just has faders, the other does not. And so, yeah, nothing crazy there. I'm also impressed. When I talk to the team, they tell me that the most difficult thing about this effects engine was fitting it within the constraints of this console. Because it's not a massive console, it doesn't have heaps and heaps of processing, especially for the cost. But they really could do a lot, and we're able to do a lot with this update. And I think it's something that's really exciting. And once these last bugs get cleaned up, I know there's a number of them that they're working on. We'll be able to have this out in the regular world for regular consoles, and it will be a very good thing for all. Awesome, folks. Well, thank you guys so much for hanging out today. Um, And oh, one more question. Cool. I'm good with questions. So, is there a preview button? Yeah, there's a blind eye right here in the corner, which takes you in and out of blind mode. So that's just like preview, blind mode. Other consoles may call it other things, but absolutely, you can go blind on your whole programmer. And if you're in the effects editor here, you can also take blind by layers, which is pretty cool. So you can turn on and off layers to see what each layer is doing. Maybe decide that you want to get rid of a layer. You can totally do that. Awesome. Well, thank you all for hanging out today. I think we've answered most of your questions here and been able to show you a really great sneak peek at the new effects. As mentioned before, it's in beta. Feel free to use it. It will wipe out your old effects. That's the only big caveat there. But if you ever do need to, always save older versions of your show file, keep them on USB sticks, back up to a computer, whatever. And if you need to roll back your software on the LightShark, more often than not, just running the older software version as an update to the newer version will work fine. If for some reason that doesn't work right, you can always factory reset and then upgrade the console back to the current release version, and you'll be just fine. Thank you guys so much for hanging out today. I hope you guys have a great day, and we'll see you around the web. Thanks.